seen, witnessed, and participated in. Both of them felt sorrowful because it was also chemical weapons used at this point. It was burning people. It was horrific. Now, there were French troops, there were British troops, and there were other European troops, of course. The outcome was in doubt. Nathan Rothschild planned to use the opportunity of this outcome to seize control of all the banks in Europe. Specifically, though, all the British stocks and all the bonds markets of England, all of them. Rothschild stationed a trusted agent named Rothward on the banks of the north side of the battlefield close to the English Channel. Very strategic move. Once the battle was done, he took off, delivered the news before Wellington's own courier. If Wellington had been defeated, Napoleon was on the loose in the continent again, Britain's financial system would become grave. Right? Rothschild hurried to the stock market, took his usual position with all eyes watching him, because he had already set this up. He began to sell his shares in front of everyone. The nervous investors saw him, panicked, and it was a feeding frenzy. Because at that point it could only mean that Wellington had lost to Napoleon. This had not only been talked about, it had been played up by Rothschild's men before the war and during the war, so that everyone knew this would be a signal. At least the people who thought they were smart investors were waiting for this sign to do what they do, much like smart investors do now. When there's one little cry out that all of a sudden somebody's doing this, everybody panic, anyone sell your stuff, and it's usually always, still to this day, a complete, utter setup, which Rothschild had planned, because all across Europe, one of the first things the Rothschild banks did was buy up portions of the papers, which they hadn't owned in the States yet, which was why the United States still had free press, and people were saying, oh shit, no, let's not buy that. Anyway, Rothschild had begun secretly, through his agents, to buy up all of these newly sold stocks for pennies on the dollar. Soon he dominated the bond market of all of Europe, especially Bank of England as well. At this point he now owned the Bank of England, who was already usury. Okay, so by the mid-1800s, the Rothschilds were the richest family in the world. The rest of the 19th century was known as the Age of the Rothschilds, contrary to popular belief, because of subsidiaries, and they like to keep themselves quiet. They don't put their big stamp on everything other than what they want you to see. For 100 years, and over 100 years later, New York Times ran a story which said Nathan Rothschild's grandson had attempted to secure a court order to suppress a book with stock market story on it with this one. The Rothschild family claimed that the story was a lie and libelous. libelous. The court denied the Rothschild's family request, ordered them to pay all court fees. The judge was found later dead of a heart attack, by the way. No, I don't know if he had fallen on any bullets. But I'm kind of thinking that. And it's interesting that it was a heart attack. So heart attack means that they or at least kind of hypothetically means that they still had ties with the Vatican, because the Vatican was still known for their poisoners, which were incredible, who could fake a heart attack with poisons from the 1400s. Believe it or not. Side note thing. So, here we go. Second Bank of the United States. 1 year after these events, American Congress passed yet another bill allowing the formation of another privately owned bank, the Second Bank of the U.S. New bank's charter was to copy the previous one. The government, U.S. government, owning 20 shares this time in the bank. Shares were paid by the Treasury, taxpayer money up front. Then, through the fraudulent practice of fractional banking, always used, the money was formed into loans, with the loan money used as by the private banks to purchase the remaining 80% of the bank's shares. Just as before, the primary shareholders remained a secret. However, the largest blocks, about 1/3 of the shares, were sold to foreigners. The Second Bank of the United States was deeply rooted in Britain. I would say it really looks like, from all the reading I've done, that 1/3 at this point of the 80% was owned by Britain. I would guess the other third is the Vatican, and the last third was spread around Europe. I think the only American thing that was owned is, if you want to call the Rothschilds American at that point, or the Europeans who had moved over that were filthy rich at that point, Americans. But as you know, the majority of people in the U.S. government never actually been. Their birth of being, yes, I'm American, sketchy at best. And we can go through that in one show. It's pretty interesting. Anywho, Second Bank of the U.S. was deeply rooted in Britain. By 1816, Rothschilds had taken control over Bank of England, the new privately held Second Bank of the U.S. Then we have Andrew Jackson, who said, "I killed the bank." Sorry to Doug. 7th official president of the United States. Now, 12 years after the Second Bank of the U.S., the manipulating of the American economy was in full frontal nudity. American people had had enough. Opponents of the bank nominated a senator from Tennessee, Andrew Jackson, hero of the Battle of New Orleans. You believe that? Bloodbath, president of all time. Initially, no one gave him a chance. The banks had long been able to control the political process already with the money. All the ones that are counted as presidents had been supplied. To the surprise and dismay, I guess, Andrew swept into office 1828. Jackson was determined to kill the bank at the first opportunity and wasted no time. However, the bank's 20-year charter didn't come up for renewal until 1836. Last year of his second term, if he could survive that long. During his first term, Jackson rooted out bank minions from government service. He fired 2,000 of the 11,000 employees of the federal government. In 1832, his re-election approaching, the bank struck, hoping that Jackson would not want to stir up a controversy. The banks asked Jackson to sign a new renewal bill 4 years early. Congress complied. They sent it to him to sign, and he vetoed it. The veto bill is one of, well, America's greatest documents, clearly laying the responsibility of the American government towards its citizens, rich and poor, but unfortunately it was only towards the white citizens, which, at that point, well, citizens, we have to say what that means. The ones he called citizens were actually in the minority of the population on what they would now call American soil. So he wanted freedom for a few guys. I guess it's better than what you're seeing now, who nobody has freedom. No guys are the preferred guys. Long story. We'll go into that one later too. Okay, so if government would confine itself to equal protection, and as heaven does its rains, shower favor alike on the high and the low and the rich and the poor, then it would be an unqualified blessing here in the act that we're talking about, if that was true. But Congress tried to override Jackson's veto. Jackson had to run for re-election, took his argument directly to the people. For the first time in presidential history, Jackson took his campaign for re-election on the road. His campaign slogan was Jackson and no bank. National Republican Party ran Senator Henry Clay against him, despite the fact that the banker spent more than $3 million on Clay's campaign. Jackson was re-elected. Yeah, they saw a problem, and they said, how much money do I need to throw at this situation to make it go away? But it was only the beginning, of course. Only the beginning. And as we know, it didn't work out. Now we have around, this is around 1833. Government money was being withdrawn from the banks. The bank's head, Biddle, at the time used his influence to get a Senate to re-elect another one of their guys. In a rare show of arrogance, Biddle threatened to cause a depression out loud in front of people if the bank was not rechartered. But it's not really rare because we've seen it happen the first time, right? This worthy president thinks that because he scalped Indians, yep, that was part of his re-election thing too. And as for the scalping, well, we'll wait till 2 Dogs on when to talk about that. I can't even say what he actually did. And imprison judges, which he did. He is to have his way with the bank. He is mistaken. Biddle admitted that he was going to make money scarce, and that's what he did. Biddle clearly intended to use the money power of the bank to cause a major depression, and that's exactly what he did. He made good his threat. The bank began to contract money, like it's going on now, refusing and calling in old loans, refusing to extend new ones. Financial panic ensued, followed by another deep dish depression. Wages plummeted, unemployment soared, businesses went bankrupt, people were starving on the streets. On January 8th, 1985, Jackson paid off the final installment of the national debt, which had been necessary. And it happened by allowing the banks to issue currency for the government bonds, rather than issuing treasury notes without debt. Jackson was the only president to ever pay off the debt in American history. The next few weeks, an assassin.